Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Maybe some more people will join us in a little bit. Thank you, everybody, again for joining and for being here on time. Welcome to Scripps Research, fully interactive resources for students and teachers, or FIRST. My name is Rosie Alvaran-Zeckler, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. And if it is the first time that you are participating in one of our webinars, or even that you've heard of Scripps Research, I wanted to tell you that we are one of the largest nonprofit private biomedical research institutes in the nation, and our mission is to develop the next generation of medicines and diagnostics to address the most pressing health concerns in the world, such as COVID-19. We normally support also our community of teachers and students in person through various educational outreach programs. But we have started these webinar series after, as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected the way that we attend school and we take classes and the way that educators have to teach classes as well. So thank you again for being here, and we encourage you to visit our website after this and to contact us if you'd like more information. For today's presentation, we have a panel of 3 graduate students, Julia Jones, Lara Ibrahim, and Carlos Aguirre, who will be discussing issues of diversity in science and research, as the title suggests. They represent a diversity of cultural backgrounds and are very passionate about outreach, promoting diversity and inclusion, and also talking to students about their journey into science and their research work. For today's presentation, we have a panel of 3 graduate students, Julia Jones, Lara Ibrahim, and Carlos Aguirre, who will be discussing issues of diversity in science and research, as the title suggests. They represent a diversity of cultural backgrounds and are very passionate about outreach, promoting diversity and inclusion, and also talking to students about their journey into science and their research work. We hope that you get inspired by these stories. Before we begin, I want to touch on some housekeeping items. As you know, or as a reminder, all of you have been muted and your videos have been disabled. The way for you to communicate with the panelists and the moderators is by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So just take a minute right now to look at the menu down below and you can see the Q&A button. You can type in your questions at any time, but we're gonna be taking it on the second part of this presentation. So we're gonna be, I'm gonna be posting some questions to the panelists for the first 10-15 minutes, and then we're gonna be taking your questions on the second part. We also want to interact with you, and we're gonna be doing these using polls. And I think that at this moment is a good time to practice using polls. And basically our first set of questions is to get to know our audience, you. And this is going to inform our panelists on how to answer the questions. So if you please take a second to answer the questions that are now on your screen. So first, it asks you about your education or your occupation, sorry, and then it's going to ask you why you're here today. And I'm going to be sharing the results with you. Great, so as we can see, the majority of you are college students. We have some high school students and some faculty and STEM professionals. And also, so the reason why you're here is varies. So interacting with the scientists, figuring out if you can have a science career, and making the most of your time. So thank you so much for participating in this poll. So now without further delay, I'd like to go with our panelists. I want to thank them for being here today. And why don't we start, if you guys could please introduce yourself briefly. And let's do it in this order, Julia, Lara, and Carlos. So Julia?
Hi everyone, my name is Julia Jones. I'm a second-year graduate student here at Scripps Research in the Yang Lab, where we work on proteins called enzymes. And I went to UNC Chapel Hill for undergrad, where I majored in chemistry.
Thank you. Lara?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lara Ibrahim. I'm also a second-year graduate student at Scripps Research in the labs of Luke Wiseman and Michael Ballin. And in these labs, I'm interested in applying chemical biology techniques to find therapeutics for various diseases. I did my undergrad at UC Davis, where I studied pharmaceutical chemistry with a minor in neuroscience.
Great. And Carlos?
Hello, everyone. My name is Carlos. I'm a fourth-year graduate student in the Conti Lab. I conduct Parkinson's disease research, and I did my undergraduate at UC Irvine. I majored in pharmaceutical sciences.
Great. So, as you know, and you know, the title suggests, the title of a webinar suggests what we're going to be talking about. So, as you know, there are many types of diversity. And when we talk about diversity, we can think it in terms of ethnicity, in terms of experience, education level, gender, sexual identity, even immigration status, I would think. So my next question for the panelists is to ask them what diversity means to you, and also what are the benefits of having a diverse environment. And again, if we can do it in the same order, Julia and Lara and Carlos.
Yeah, I think diversity means to me a group of people coming from all groups in all walks of life, whether that's ethnically, culturally, socioeconomically, and coming together to work on a common goal. And I think that in science, we really need diversity because we need to get all perspectives to come up with the best ideas to solve issues in our public health, especially at Scripps Research, where we do a lot of biomedical research. If we want to tackle these huge problems for all groups of people, we need all groups of people working on it to really come together with their perspective and critical thinking to best do research.
Right. Lara?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Julia said. And for me, diversity means celebrating people from all backgrounds and walks of life. And this includes not only in science and the workplace, but in every aspect of life. And a lot of science is about problem solving, and good problem solving requires looking at an issue from various perspectives. And to help with that, I think diversity provides these different perspectives in proposing solutions and ideas. And also, as we know, the world is continuously becoming more interconnected. And there's this concept of being a global citizen. And in order to do that, we need to be informed and interact with different cultures.
That's great. Thank you. Carlos?
Yeah, to me, diversity means people understanding each other, coming together to learn from each other, and just being respectful of each other if it's in the workplace or just out in the environment. Definitely also just having fun together. And particularly in science, diversity is important because with healthcare and medicine, there's this pursuit of personalized medicine. So therefore, this pursuit of personalized medicine is important with diversity because a diverse workforce will know how to target the diverse ethnic and cultural populations of the world.
Yeah, that's great. That touches on another point on health disparities as well. So thank you so much for those definitions. And if we can narrow it a little bit more, because it could be that in our audience, when people see these topic, sometimes they are trying to identify themselves. And we have seen that in science, there's more women and more students from all different kind of backgrounds that are pursuing science degrees and higher degrees like PhDs and MDs. But however, I would say that there's still a lot of gains that we can accomplish, and there's continued to be underrepresentation of certain groups as Hispanics, African Americans, Native Americans, and even women in some fields of science. So for my next question, I wanted to ask all of you, if you can think of what are still the challenges that exist, that prevent us to having a more diverse and inclusive environment in research. And if any of the students who are attending today identify themselves with these challenges or these groups, what will be your advice? And let's do it in the same order, Julia, Laura, and Carlos.
Yeah, I definitely think there are still challenges for underrepresented people in science. For me, as an African-American woman, having no family, pursue higher education, especially anyone even doing science in my family, I think it's still very tricky to even know where to go for researchers or what you should be doing if you want a career path in science. And so I think that is part of the reason why we still are missing some of these groups of people in science, is because they didn't know where to go. And so if you're not in the pool of applicants to pick from, it makes it really hard. And so I think the most important thing to do if you're not sure where to go is be as proactive as possible. I think especially when I was in undergrad, I realized that I needed to be proactive if I wanted something to happen. And so really just reaching out to professors, reaching out to your friends who may know people, building a social network is really helpful, and that can really connect you to people who can educate you, bring you to resources, help you find internships, help you find jobs, no matter what it is. And so I think really having a strong network will be a great way that we can really help increase the representation of underrepresented minorities in science.
Great. Laura?
Yeah, I would agree that there are still a lot of challenges to be faced. From my perspective, my parents immigrated to the US from Jordan. So growing up in the US, I hadn't gotten the chance to meet many scientists with backgrounds like mine, especially other Middle Eastern women. So with that strain of thought, I think it's important to find a good support system of people who understand where you're coming from and can meet you where you're at in the learning process. And this goes especially for finding mentors within the field of science who can help encourage you and motivate you to become the best science that you can be. And I think being proactive is one of the best ways to make advancements in science, especially as a minority. You want to be sure that you're taking full advantage of every opportunity that you come across, and just having confidence in yourself and the people that support you, that you can make these advancements, I think is really important.
Great. Carlos?
Yeah, so I identify as a first-generation Latino college graduate. My family did come from Mexico. I was born in Los Angeles, and in pursuing higher education, there definitely was a high learning curve since I was the first in my family to pursue college. And so the learning curve was not just for me, but it was also for my parents and for my siblings. So there's that obstacle that had to be overcome. Also just finding out about opportunities. Seeking out those opportunities definitely is another thing that must be learned. And yeah, I guess there's this sense of like family responsibility when it comes to a background with a family that immigrated from another country. But there's just communication involved, a lot of communication involved to just learn together.
Thank you for that and for opening up. So Julia, you brought the idea of mentors, and I know that in our last panel last week, the students out there, they had questions about how to create this relationship with potential mentors when you don't know. And so remember that we have both high school and college students in the audience, and maybe you want to address the question a little bit different for each, but how would you go about finding mentors and building that relationship?
Yeah, I think the best way to really find those mentors or those people that can support you and guide you is definitely starting with teachers. I think that is the easiest resource while you're in high school, especially. That for me, I remember I took AP chemistry and I really realized that I really enjoy science and maybe chemistry was what I wanted to pursue. And my AP teacher was really encouraging and supportive. And she just kind of spoke to me. I didn't initiate it because I didn't know at the time that you should. And she kind of initiated the mentor role. And I took that opportunity to really learn from her and to try to get an understanding of what it meant to pursue chemistry and where I could go with that and what I should do next. And then going into college, mentorship becomes even more important as you're moving on to your next steps and figuring out what you want to do. And for me, I think, again, professors that lecture you in different classes, you can start to get a sense if you go to office hours and just talking to them. I think the biggest thing is to be comfortable to just start conversations. And from there, you can understand quickly if you think you can really talk to this person comfortably or not. And so I think those first steps of just conversations with teachers and professors is probably, for me, was the easiest way to help get guidance.
Great. And it's important to remember that mentors sometimes can open the door to new opportunities, including research opportunities. And also and we're going to talk more about this later, for internships and the such, you will need recommendation letters, and these mentors could be your references. So Carlos, you discussed something very interesting that actually, so I also have a Hispanic background and my husband as well, and something that my husband always brings up because his parents also didn't know much about the system here and higher education. So do you want to talk a little bit more about how, how to do the transition, how to educate your family if you need it? Expand a little bit more on what you started.
Yeah, okay, let's see, where do I start with that? That's interesting. So the transition for myself and my family. Well, it did start with a lot of tears for my mother, the first quarter of my first year in college. I did try to communicate with her that it was just gonna be tough, right? So I moved out of the house. I went to a UC. I couldn't visit as much anymore. I couldn't help out at home as much anymore. And I guess it's not that I was obligated to help out at home, but it would have been nice. And so I think that's what affected at least my mother the most. The lack of just being able to see me and then helping out at home. But I think once the communication started, that if I focus on myself, that's going to be the best way to help out the family in the long run. So it's a short-term investment in education for long-term gain, not just for yourself, but for your family, right? And for future generations, especially when you're the first generation to go to college. So yeah, the transition was definitely difficult. My father was more worried about money, how expensive college was. And so when I saw that, at least for him, it was more of communicating with him to, don't worry about working too much. I'm going to do my best to gain good grades so that I could apply to programs that actually target diverse and underrepresented minority groups in science. And these programs that are funded by the NIH, by the government, they will actually, once you have a good GPA, obviously if you show a passion for science and for research science, if you qualify and get accepted by those programs, they'll start to pay your tuition, to then also help you get into a research laboratory. And so that's the way I went about communicating with my family.
Great, thank you. And yeah, just to pick up on that, there are many opportunities out there for minority students, including internships. And at Scripps Research, we have different programs that we basically pay the interns to do research. So after the webinar, again, I encourage you to visit our page or reach out to us to learn more about these programs. And Laura, you touch a little bit of mentors like Julia, but I think you also talk a little bit about role models. And that is something that in the topic of diversity, I've seen a lot of research and discussion that one of the potential solutions to increase diversity and to have a more inclusive environment is to have more role models that look like everyone. Do you want to expand a little bit on role models?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think it's hard to specifically find role models that might look like us. I think it's important to find role models that understand where we're coming from and work with us on that. I guess in that respect, one role model that I have is my mom, because she studied and went to college, became a pharmacist back in Jordan before coming to the US, and especially at a time where a lot of women did not do that. So she's always been a role model for me. And in terms of mentors, I had the opportunity to work in the lab of a math professor at UC Davis, and he's been one of the greatest mentors to me. He was always very encouraging and informative. As an undergrad, not sure if I wanted to go into research, he was very patient and explained everything in a very clear way. And I think of him as one of the key mentors that has gotten me to go down this research path, for sure.
Great. And before we move on into the questions from the audience, I'd like to know a little bit about you, more about you in terms of why research. Like, when was the first time that you thought that you wanted to have a research career, or that you felt really passionate about science? Was it middle school, high school? Was it until undergrad? So Julia, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. For me, like I mentioned, I had taken AP Chemistry in high school. I also took AP Environmental Science. And in AP Environmental Science, we got to go on field trips. And we went to this wastewater treatment plant, and there were environmental chemists. And I had no idea what that meant, but I just thought it looked so cool that they were just being able to test things in the natural world using chemistry, which I thought was also interesting in class. And so going into college, I thought I liked a lot of subjects, but science for sure was really interesting. And I wanted to continue into science. In senior year of high school, I actually applied for a 4-year scholarship through the American Chemical Society, which is a scholarship aimed for minorities in science, and it's to support them. And they exposed me to internship opportunities that really furthered my passion for science. And from there, I just tried to take as many experiences as possible to really understand what type of science I liked.
Great. Laura?
Yeah, as I mentioned, my mom was a pharmacist before coming to the US. So she introduced science to my sisters and I from a very young age. And her and my dad have always been really supportive of us developing our interests in science. So I'm very grateful for that. And so since a young age, we've been doing science fairs and all those sorts of things. And I've always enjoyed how science seems so, there's this sort of limitless exploration. And the more that you look into things, the more intricacy and harmony you find, especially in fields like biochemistry. It's pretty amazing. So when I went to college, UC Davis, I was planning to become a pharmacist, but I took advantage of a lot of different experiences that were offered to us at the university. For example, I took part of this internship, a year-long rotation through the pharmacy departments at UC Davis's medical center. Meanwhile, during that year-long rotation, I was also volunteering in 2 different research labs on campus. One was more computational, theoretical, not so much wet lab work, and the other one was more biochemistry wet lab work. And between all of these experiences, I found that I enjoyed the research much more than the rotations through the pharmacy departments. And from there, I've kind of decided that that is what I want to go into.
Great. Carlos?
Yeah, so for me, I didn't really know or had this feeling that I was going to be a scientist. So senior year of high school, it was more of me wanting to pursue either becoming a chef or a pilot. And then a teacher at that time, a high school teacher, just gave me some advice, informing me that whatever I do, I should still pursue a college degree, because in the long run, it'll be beneficial, even if I become a chef or a pilot. So I went to college and I majored as a science major, because in high school, the science courses were my favorite because of the lab experiments. And so then as an undergraduate, I was doing okay in the lecture courses, but in the laboratory courses, I was doing fantastic and I was having fun. And so the teaching assistants of the laboratory courses, they noticed that, and they informed me about graduate school, about pursuing a graduate degree, a PhD. And they informed me if I do consider that option, then I should gain some undergraduate research experience in a laboratory. So that's how I started my transition into a research scientist career. And here I am today.
Great. So I guess now I'd like to stop for a second. We're going to put on your screen the second poll or set of questions. And meanwhile, please also, I want to remind you to go and type in your questions for our panelists using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So if you can take a second to answer these questions here. So I see that most people are enjoying the stories from our panelists, the advice that you're receiving on science careers. And you'd like to hear more about what does a scientist do, so maybe they can talk a little bit about their research. And also you want to learn about how does it feel to be a scientist. Perfect. So while we get some questions, does any of you want to take that question? Like, does research entail? What does a scientist do? Carlos,
So,
you want to start? Oh,
yeah, I'll start it. So I'll answer the second part of that question first. What does a scientist do? A scientist does everything. Yeah, you're labeled as a scientist, but it doesn't mean you're just focusing on science. You're learning everything, right? So my project or my emphasis is neuroscience, but I work with computers. I work with the brain. I work on a lab bench. I write a lot, so I'm on my laptop a lot. I'm at outreach events a lot. So a scientist does whatever they want and a lot of things. What does research mean, I guess, to me, or what is it? Research is just investigating the mysteries, at least in regards to science. Research is investigating the mysteries of the natural world, the unsolved questions of the natural world. And the way you do that is through observations and formulating a hypothesis. And then you do experiments to conduct research.
Great. Julia or Lara, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, just going off it, I think, yeah, what does a scientist do? I think a lot of people, my family and friends, they call me and they're like, you're at home for a month. Like, you're not at the bench just pipetting all day. What could you possibly be doing? And I'm like, oh, actually I have a lot to do. There's more to science than just being at a benchtop performing experiments. There's a lot of things you need to do to analyze, to come up with experiments. A lot of literature research is required, constantly combing through what other scientists have published, figuring out what works, what doesn't work is really important. And writing proposals is also a really important part in science, where it's important to learn how to write good science and communicate the information out to everyone. And so there's a lot of components that are not just benchtop in science as well.
Great. Lara?
Yeah, and I would add to that, a big part of science is probing the unknown. in order to do that, you have to know what is known about your topic, and that's where the vast amount of literature is very important. So like Julie said, combing through that, that'll help you form next experiments that are informative and cutting edge and based on good and validated data. So that's, I think, a big part of science too, is looking at the literature.
Great. And also going off on what you said, from the unknown, you have to be comfortable with uncertainty and you have to have a lot of curiosity. So if you have those things, I always tell my interns that those are good features of scientists. So let's go to the first question here. I'm going to read it. It's, what would you say was the turning point in your education where you knew you would succeed in science? And how do you build your confidence to pursue science careers?
Yeah, I think I didn't know. I was unsure for sure whether or not I could really pursue science, because for me in high school, I had a 4.0, I did great. In undergrad, participating in club, playing sports, and doing classes, and then starting research, it was a lot for me. And so I didn't always do well in my chemistry classes. And so it definitely was hard, but I knew that, like you had mentioned, the curiosity. I loved the problems and I loved what people were trying to figure out in science, and that you could constantly ask questions. And so it wasn't as obvious as it was maybe for me in high school to realize that I liked chemistry. It was more just really understanding what is chemistry, what is biology, what's being asked is really what helped push me to continue on in science. And like I said, the internships that I had were really great. And I did have research experiences that weren't great. And so I did, again, kind of question, oh, maybe science isn't for me. But I realized through more experiences that it wasn't science, it was just that specific subject. So it's really important to really get a lot of different experiences that I learned what type of science I truly was passionate about and interested in. And so there may be some obstacles there in determining when science is right, but I think if you really have to just sit down with yourself and see what you like.
Great. Anybody else wants to add? Carlos, you want to add?
Yeah, let me see here the question again. Basically, I think for me, the turning point in my education in which I knew I would succeed in science was when I got my grades up. So first year, I didn't get good grades in college, but then second year, I got good grades, and then I joined a research laboratory. And so the turning point was when I was able to balance being in research in a research laboratory and getting good grades. That's when I told myself, if you can do that right now during your second year, then there's no reason for you to continue not doing it your third and your fourth year. And so with regards to the second part of that question, what is it here?
How will you build your confidence? Yeah.
Do you build your confidence to pursue science careers? Well, thankfully, at least for me, building my confidence was through those NIH-funded programs that are out there for underrepresented minority groups. And those programs are definitely beneficial for that.
Great. I want to move on, so I'm going to read another question. So a good one is, what kind of careers can I expect from a degree in science? Particularly, I know that you guys are pursuing a PhD in biomedical research, and are some harder than others for minorities? So maybe talk about your challenges. Lara, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So a lot of times people think that pursuing a PhD will either land you a job in what's called academia or in industry, but there's actually a lot more beyond that. There's science advocacy, you can become a scientific writer, so there's really a lot that you can do. For myself, I think I want to become, and I'm still a second year, so no plans set in stone yet, but I think I would like to go more the academia route. Oftentimes in academia, the professors are expected both to teach and to run their own lab and conduct research. However, some schools you can just be a teacher, so I'm hoping to be a lecturer at some university or liberal arts college. And I know that some positions are more competitive than others. I know that becoming a professor or a PI, a primary investigator, as we call it, at some of these large research-oriented institutes is very competitive because of the funding. So I know that can be difficult. But I think most universities and places are becoming more aware of the need for diversity. So at least there's that can be helpful.
Thank you. Anybody else? So we have our next question then. And it goes a little bit off on what you were already touching, Lara. So how does a scientist provide for themselves, such as living expenses, when they are months into certain proposals or research plans? And how do you factor in stress?
Interesting.
Anybody wants to take on this one first?
I guess I'll start it. As an undergrad, I've mentioned this a lot now, but as an undergrad, if you do qualify for these NIH-funded programs, then some of these programs will pay your tuition fully and even give you a stipend, so a salary per year, right? So that's the way that you can live and have an income as an undergraduate student. As a graduate student in a PhD program, you get a salary stipend, so you're able to get that income through that. Yeah.
Great. And the next question is, what are some important skills they should be focusing on planning for a career in science? So Julia, do you want to start with that one? Important skills?
Yeah. Like Laura had mentioned, science means a lot. You have to do writing, you have to do proper communication, you have to have the curiosity. There's a lot of things that go into it. So there's a lot of skills that could definitely help you. I think writing skills is kind of underestimated. It might be the right word. I didn't realize going into science how much you may have to write, whether it's a paper, whether it's just a write-up of an experiment. You need to clearly communicate your science so that way people know what you did in a clear manner and people can repeat it. And so that's an important skill I didn't realize, and I didn't really start gaining until I came to graduate school, which is a great place if you are interested in that. I also think that it's really important to get the skills of feeling confident and comfortable to really be, again, proactive and communicate with people so that you get the best resources you could get and get the most experiences you can get. So as much scientific experience will really help you in determining what type of science is for you, what is fun about science for you, and maybe, you know, where do you want to go in science? Because like Laura mentioned, there's a lot of avenues. So I think getting the experience is really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely agree with you that communication is an important skill that a lot of people overlook. And right when you have to write your personal statements, your research statements to get into grad school, you should be able to convey your message clearly and in succinct way. And yeah, college is it's a good time to start honing your communication skills. I want to remind the audience that we have a few more minutes. So if you want to get in your questions, that will be great. Okay, we have another question here. Do you have any advice for those of us who are getting back into school after taking a few years off, like career changes or time for family? Or any advice for those that are getting back into school and did not attend college straight after high school? This is a great question.
And maybe I can, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you go.
I'll say a bit, though I did go straight into grad school from undergrad. I do think it would have been actually helpful to take some time in between to gain some more experience. And I just wanted to offer a word of encouragement that in our class alone, so in Julie and I are both second years, and we have people in all sorts of stages of life. From their 20s to 30s that are in our class, so it's never too late. And I know Julia took some time in between, so I think I'll let her speak more on that.
Yeah, I after graduating, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to pursue a PhD in science and what type of science that would be. Like I said, I had a bad undergrad experience in research at one point, and it led me to question whether I wanted to pursue science. So I did take 2 years off in between undergrad and grad school, and I think it was great. And it gave me more time to hang out with my family and my friends, make money, and go on vacations to see the world. And so I don't regret doing that at all. I was able to take my parents on vacations, and it was great. And I think taking time for you is necessary sometimes, and as always can only be a plus. And so going back into graduate school, granted my time off was only 2 years, so it wasn't too long, but going back into classes, I was like, how do I study again? And I think really just sitting down and trying to come up with what are the best ways for you to study, what are the best places you can go to do your work, because maybe home is not the place where you can focus. When outbreaks are not happening, you can go to Starbucks or libraries and things like that. And so I think really just figuring out with yourself, how can you best focus, and you can get back in the swing if it's something that you're passionate about and you're really interested in pursuing. So
Great. And I would add, if the question is more between going from high school to college, if you want to watch the previous webinar last week, one of our panelists, he actually had that question and he didn't know if college was right for him. And he spoke a little bit about going for a 2-year degree and then finding about research along the way, and then transitioning into 4-year college and the such. So I encourage you to take a look at that webinar as well. So there's another question here. It says, I heard that in some jobs you work overtime and on the weekends. You know, in research we do that a lot. Is work-life balance easy, or how do you accomplish that? And how do you keep up with things at home? And I would add, like, how do you have fun? Anybody wants to start?
I guess since I'm a fourth year, I'll just start that. The work-life balance, I think you just learn how to have that work-life balance in research science. I think the first year, maybe first 2 years, it might be a little bit more of a learning how to have that work-life balance, but you definitely then learn how to do that. And then the part two of how do I have fun, at least for me, I guess although my profession is science, my hobbies are more of arts. So I definitely like to go to like a lot of art festivals, a lot of like art walks in downtowns and events like that. And of course, I still like to cook. So I definitely have fun cooking new recipes.
Good. So I guess we'll take our last question here. Have you faced any adversity being an ethnic minority in science, more specifically being an ethnic woman in research in science?
I guess I can start. So my bad experience in science was I had done a summer internship and I really enjoyed it. I had a African-American woman mentor who really understood where I was coming from and was really great. And from that internship, I realized I should pursue undergrad research experience. And in that lab, I didn't really know where to go. So I kind of emailed every chemistry professor at UNC, which was a lot. And I didn't really meet with the person in advance. So I didn't really know anything. I didn't know too much about them before I decided to join the lab. And so in that lab, it was mainly white men. There was one woman there, and the professor didn't learn my name. He mixed me up with another woman, African-American woman from his previous lab. And so it was not a good experience. And I think they expected me to maybe have more knowledge coming in, or I'm not sure. So I never really met with them much, and I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing in this undergrad lab. It was nothing like my industry internship. And so expectations were kind of a mystery, and I'm not sure if there were expectations there set, but I wasn't aware of them. And so it kind of was definitely a tougher situation where I didn't know where to go. and no one, I couldn't really bond with anyone per se, and it definitely was challenging, and none of my friends were in any research labs, so I didn't really know what to do. And so I kind of just walked away from that experience because I realized it was more stressing than it was fun. But I think the biggest thing I learned, I graduated and I was like, I think I still like science. That was just really weird. I don't know. And I just decided to go with my gut and try out something else that sounded maybe more interesting science. And that experience really helped me rediscover my passion for science. And so I think sometimes there are difficulties in not knowing, and just kind of the unknown, where expectations aren't laid out, especially for underrepresented minority groups where you may not have anyone or know anyone going through it as well. And so now I definitely have more resources. I have more guidance and people I can talk to, whether that's other students, classmates, other friends from undergrad, my professors here now. And I definitely talk to more professors, and that has been really helpful to just hear more and more advice from different people. So it's kind of a learning curve for me on how to challenge maybe some of those things that underrepresented minorities face.
Thank you. So unfortunately, we're running out of time. And so I want to ask each of you for some final remarks. And then meanwhile, we can also be answering the final poll, which is some feedback on how we did. And we appreciate if you can answer those questions. So just for final remarks, Lara, do you want to begin?
Sure. Well, first, thank you all for attending this webinar. We hope it was helpful. I just want to remind you guys to have confidence in yourself and in the people that support you. Make sure to ask for help when needed, and to be proactive and take advantage of every opportunity that you find.
Great, thank you. Carlos?
I'd like to say to stay focused, stay patient, and don't give up.
Great. Julia?
Yeah, definitely do things that make you excited and have fun while you're doing it, for sure.
Great, thank you. Yeah, if we can get our third poll up. Meanwhile, I want to let everybody know that I know there are more questions, and we're gonna have our panelists answer them, and we're gonna be putting on our webpage. There's the link in the chat box. If you see from Nitya, there's a link where you can find our old webinars and also more resources, including demos or fun experiments. And also this is where you're gonna find the answers to all the questions. Please give us a week or so for us to put those up there. And after the poll and after the webinar closes, you're gonna be redirected to a survey also for us to know how we did. And if you have some suggestions on other topics that you want to hear about, and that will be a great place and a great opportunity for you to provide that feedback. At the end of the survey, you also will be redirected to the page of the resources and where you can find other webinars. So I see that most of you are motivated and that you understood. I'm glad. And that you like the panel. And I want to thank everybody again for joining us today. We hope that you join us for future webinars and that you visit our pages. The next webinar, I should say, is this Thursday at the same time. That's a demo. We're gonna be discussing DNA and showing how to extract DNA from strawberries. And our next panel is next Tuesday at the same time, and that will be on issues of women in science. So thank you again for joining, and we'll see you next time.